The challenge of the Yukon.
I'm king of you huskies!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. The story behind the fabulous valor of Diamond was one mixed with good and bad fortune for those who possessed it. It seems strange indeed that this diamond, resting safely in the United States in 1897, was destined to be the cause of death in the Yukon, a territory as incredible as the almost legendary story of the precious stone itself. In the old Barlow mansion in New York City, there was a deep quiet. The servants talked in hushed whispers as nurses in crisply starched uniforms went back and forth through the echoing halls to Mrs. Barlow's bedroom. Doctors held lengthy consultations. There were consultations, too, in the kitchen, as the cook brewed an early morning cup of tea.
Here now, Adams, just settle yourself comfortable. What you ever need of is a good cup of tea. You too, Mary.
They say Mrs. Barlow will hardly last the day.
Yeah, she's pretty far gone. Young Mr. George is a mighty sad man.
As if he didn't have enough on his mind.
And just what are you meaning by that?
Why, that girl, Emily Quinn. Her and her father left for Seattle yesterday. From there, she says they're going to the Yukon. The note he got this morning was a bad blow to him, I can tell you.
All the better she's gone, if you're asking my opinion. That forsaken Yukon country is the place for the likes of her. No family background at all.
His mother would never hear of the match.
His mother will have nothing to say about it. She's a dying woman. That's the only reason young George didn't take the next steamer out for the Yukon himself.
Well, he's up with his mother now.
Poor soul. She knows there's not much time.
George, dear.
Yes, Mother.
I want you to promise me something.
Try to rest, please.
No, listen to me. It's the diamond.
What about it, Mother?
Promise me you'll never give it up. I'm an old woman and perhaps a foolish one. But the stone has brought misfortune to anyone who's ever gotten it through wickedness.
I promise, Mother.
Remember, dear, it's the only thing I ask of you. Remember.
It was a few days after Mrs. Barlow's death. In the library of the old house, George Barlow spent a hurried few minutes going through miscellaneous papers. His cousin, Henry Drake, walked slowly around the room, peering at the titles of the books along the shelves.
Well, that's that.
All finished?
At last.
George, about the diamond.
Huh?
Aunt Mary told me she wanted you to keep it with you.
As a matter of fact, she made me promise I always would. Why?
Taking it with you?
I gave my promise, Henry. Though I don't like the idea of carrying around a stone that size.
Since you're determined to go off to the Yukon, I thought you might take it with you. Then, after you've had enough of that place, go over to Amsterdam.
I haven't made up my mind yet what I'll do. I want to thank you for standing by as you did.
That's all right. I thought a lot of Aunt Mary, you know.
This is goodbye, then, for a while. Take care of yourself, Henry. Maybe we'll run across each other.
Maybe we will. Goodbye. We'll run across each other all right, my dear cousin. Going to the Yukon isn't exactly my idea of a pleasant trip. But the valor of Diamond is quite an inducement.
An expression of bitterness crossed the young man's face. He reached inside his coat and from a pocket drew out a slender sheath. Pulling out the stiletto, he held the point expertly between his thumb and index finger. Then, stepping back, he faced the wall paneling.
An old Mexican knife trick. A very worthwhile accomplishment.
From Skagway, it was only 600 miles to Dawson by way of Chilkoot Pass, or White Pass and Arctic Lakes and the wild White Horse Rapids. This was the shortcut to the coarse gold and nuggets countless hundreds of men sought. George Barlow hired a guide and took the shortcut because of a clue he picked up in Skagway. Somewhere in that desolate country, he would find Emily Quinn and her father. Several days later, King ran far ahead of Sergeant Preston's dogs, breaking a trail in the snow for the sled. The sharpness of the air exhilarated the great husky, and he set a fast pace for the rest of the pack.
Okay, hold you huskies.
Here we are, boy. This is where we'll stop.
A short time later, King ran through the timber over the crest of a snow-covered hill. He tilted his nose in the air and stopped a moment as he caught the scent of another camp off in the distance. His curiosity aroused, he went forward quickly. King approached the two men unobserved. He knew he'd never seen either of them before, so he stopped at a prudent distance and watched. One of them might have been an Indian as far as the dog could make out. He was the one who carried a rifle as he walked. As King watched them, he was conscious of another scent. The two men had paused for a moment, so that the lynx coming suddenly into view was unaware of its danger. Too late, he saw them.
Jose, a lynx. Your rifle. See.
King felt, rather than saw, the pain of the wounded animal. For a fraction of a second, the lynx hesitated, then ran in leaps, zigzagging confusedly, desperately. Then the man, who was apparently unarmed, did a surprising thing. He had a slender knife in his hand, calculated for a moment, and at the next frenzied leap of the lynx, he threw it. The knife caught the animal in the chest.
How's that for accuracy, Jose?
It was all over. King heard the cruel edge in the man's laughter, and he was contemptuous of him.
You handle the stiletto like the Mexican, senor. And you carry the knife like the Mexican, eh, senor? They use no sheath, but it's dangerous.
I use it better than any Mexican, so I might as well carry it as they do. Only one sheath, and I would have to leave it in that confounded steamer. Here, lift this animal.
It was early evening, 2 days later. A light snow was still falling as Sergeant Preston called,
Okay, all you huskies.
A campfire was burning back from the trail, and as the Mountie approached, a young girl and an elderly man rose to meet him.
Hey, welcome, stranger.
Mind if my dogs and I share your campfire? I'm Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police.
Pleased to meet you, Sergeant. I'm Jack Quinn, and this is my daughter, Emily.
How do you
Emily?
do? What a magnificent dog, Sergeant. What's his name?
Well, this is King.
Well, I haven't been up here long, but I can tell from the looks of him he's a mighty fine husky. Oh, say, Emily, seems like we're going to have more company. There's another sled coming.
Yes, you're right, Mr. Quinn.
This is more people than we've seen since we left Skagway, Dad.
It is at that. Sure is a lonesome country.
I don't think Dad's as happy up here as he thought he'd be, Sergeant. You see,
Hold you huskies.
Miss Quinn, is there something wrong?
Emily, child, you're as white as a sheet. What's the matter?
George.
Emily, darling.
Well, I'll be if it isn't young Barlow.
As the two young people talked happily, Sergeant Preston got the story behind George Barlow's coming to the Yukon. The young man told the Mountie how, the previous night, his pack had mysteriously been stolen. Meanwhile, another sled approached the camp, where Preston talked to George Barlow, Emily Quinn, and her father.
I should have known it wouldn't be in the pack. I was a fool not to think of the pouch before. Must be around his neck. This time, luck's on my side. With the snow to cover my tracks, it's a perfect setup.
March you, Malamoots.
We're joining my cousin, Jose. Tonight we'll all bunker on the same campfire.
King watched Sergeant Preston's new friends greet the man they called Henry. He watched, too, for his master's reaction to the newcomer he had seen a few days ago. And he sensed that because these people seemed to know each other, the Mountie accepted Henry Drake as one of them. At Preston's feet, several hours after supper, The great dog carefully weighed the feeling of goodwill everyone showed Henry against his own dislike for him. The two were not to be reconciled. His instinct told him the man with the hard laugh was an enemy, not to be trusted. It was much later that night. Curled up beside Preston, King looked from one sleeper to the other. Everyone slept heavily after a long day on the trail, but as the dog listened to Henry Drake's breathing, he realized the man was awake. Henry got up, cautiously made his way over to where George Barlow lay sleeping. He hesitated a moment. Then, bending over his cousin, he listened to his breathing. King waited. Henry had slowly and carefully lifted something from around Barlow's neck. Torn between a desire to jump him or keep quiet, King watched. He saw him pull out the knife he had thrown at the lynx when the dog prepared to jump. It was only a cord Henry held in his fingers, and he cut it quickly. When he stood up, a smile of satisfaction crossed his face. He put the knife inside his mackinaw and stepped toward the fire.
At last, the Valorous diamond.
King glanced at the sleeping man from whom Henry had taken this thing that caught the light and glittered. He had waited tensely, giving this man the benefit of the trust his friends felt for him. But when he made a movement to slip the pouch inside his mackinaw, King jumped. The dog's weight knocked Henry to his knees.
Hey, wasn't it? You ugly mutt, I'll kill... No, you don't.
What's wrong? King!
The pouch! He's got it in his teeth! Come back here!
Hey, what's wrong?
Fury swept over Henry Drake like a wave of insanity. He started after the great dog, and the dog, remembering the fate of the lynx, dodged from one side to the other. King had seen this man throw the slender knife, and he knew that if he were to take the pouch to Preston, Henry might again throw the knife and kill the Mountie. So he ran from the camp out into the darkness.
Henry!
Henry ran like a madman, everything forgotten but the diamond. A narrow gully lay across King's path, and the dog jumped it easily, but his pursuer, plunging blindly after him, fell headlong into it.
Oh! The stiletto! King, come here, boy. What's this all about?
It's Henry. Hold that lantern up a bit, will you, Mr. Quinn?
Here comes that dog of yours, Sergeant.
King, fella.
Looks like he's got something in his teeth.
The pouch.
He wants you to take it, George.
How did he get it? Where's Henry?
Lying down there in that gully. We'll have to carry him back to camp.
He wants his stiletto. He fall in the stiletto. I tell him it's dangerous to carry it without the sheath.
So that's what happened, all right. He fell on his own knife. For that pouch King gave you, George, what's in it?
Perhaps you've heard of the Valorous diamond, Sergeant. This is it. I've been wearing it in the pouch around my neck. You can see where the cord was cut.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look here by your sleeping bag. Those footprints.
Yes. Henry came over here and took it while I slept.
Well, King's the only one who knows what really happened. But it's my guess he jumped Henry and took the diamond from him, planning to return it to you as he did.
No one knew I brought it with me except Henry. You know, there's a superstition connected with this stone, Sergeant. Anyone who's tried to steal it has always come to a bad end.
Well, I'm not a superstitious man myself, George. It's my own opinion. You're very lucky King was here to guard it for you. Yes, fella. You've done a good job.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge and justice ruled triumphant. In midsummer of 1897, two young men, each bearing a heavy pack, waded ashore from a rowboat fast on the mud flats at the mouth of the Dyea River in Alaska.
Well, Luke, this is Alaskan mud we're plowing through.
Well, I'll feel better about it when I get my feet on dry ground again. Well, that does it.
Come on, let's stop in that store over there.
Hey, wait a minute. Who's that?
Huh?
That gent coming this way. Looks like he's part of a welcoming committee. Get a load of the shiner he's wearing in his shirt front.
Yeah, I've seen that guy someplace before. Hello, fellas. Going over the trail to the Klondike? Last news from there this week is great. Gold in every creek with the millions. You're sure to make a strike.
That's what we're here for, stranger.
Hey, last time I saw you, you were on a street in Denver, selling $20 bills wrapped around cakes of soap to the suckers for $1. Remember? Why, sure. Sure I remember. I'm still giving them away.
Jefferson Randolph Smith chuckled to himself. It was from his earlier street-selling line that he'd acquired his alias, Soapy Smith, a name that was to strike terror to the hearts of law-abiding citizens in Alaska. For in 1897, Soapy had landed in Dyea and had gathered under his command a band of crooks, card sharps, and cutthroats. It was several weeks after his encounter with the two men on the banks of the Dyea River. In his saloon, Jeff's Place in Skagway, he lounged comfortably in a back room. Around him was an assorted group of men, and at the feet of one of them was a German police dog, a surly animal, as well schooled in cunning as were the men he recognized as masters.
Oh, come on, Soapy. You just say the word and the boys will go over to Chilkoot Summit and really scare up some gold.
Now, wait a minute, boys. I've heard enough of this kind of talk. What's the matter? Isn't Skagway big enough for you?
It's not that. It's just that there's lots of dust on the other side of the boundary that's plenty ripe for picking.
Yeah? Well, the Canadian boundary is not going to be crossed by any of you.
Why not?
Because I say not. You're new in this country, Bill. Maybe you've never heard of the Northwest Mounted Police.
I've heard of them, all right.
They're the reason we stay on this side of the line.
How come?
They can't be bribed or scared. That's one outfit we're not mixing with. Yeah, what is it?
Hey, Soapy. There's a minister here to see you.
A minister to see me?
Yeah, he says he's taking up a collection to build a church.
A church in Skagway.
All right, wait a minute. Why, show him in, Ted.
Right. This way, mister.
You going loco, Soapy?
He's interested in money. So am I. You keep quiet now, Fritz.
Right in here.
Well, I'm glad you're able to see me, Mr. Smith. My name is Wilson, Reverend Hiram Wilson.
Pleased to meet you, Reverend.
I thought I might approach you for
Why, certainly, Reverend, certainly. I'll not only contribute to your fund, but so will my friends here. I'll start out by giving, should we say $300?
$300? Mr. Smith, that's magnificent.
Now, let's see, 100, 250, 300. Now, boys, the Reverend won't be able to do any church building with $300. So how about shelling out whatever you have on you?
Gentlemen,
I got that.
this is most generous of you. Oh, my word, that's $500 in practically no time at all.
You see the other citizens in town and tell them what Soapy Smith contributed. I'm sure they'll be more than willing to flatten the kitty.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'll do that. Well, good day, gentlemen. May you be richly rewarded for your splendid unselfishness.
Oh, Reverend.
Yes?
Stop back to see me after you've made the rounds. I'm interested in knowing about your progress.
I'll do that, Mr. Smith. Yes, I should be waiting.
Soapy, what's the idea? Making us turn out our pockets to build a church.
Now, wait. That was an investment, Bill.
An investment? What do you mean?
You'll find out.
That night, Reverend Wilson returned to Jeff's Place as he promised. He told Soapy he'd been successful, that he'd collected well over $3,000. Soapy appeared to be delighted and told the minister he should stay upstairs in the saloon that night, where there was a comfortable bed for him. The Reverend retired early, and shortly after 2 o'clock that night, Soapy came into the back room.
Well, boys, here's that investment I was telling you about. Here's more than $3,000 for our treasury.
You mean
I took the liberty of relieving Reverend Wilson of our original contributions, and a few more besides.
Soapy, that's rich!
The next morning, when Reverend Wilson discovered the theft, he hurriedly dressed. Leaving Jeff's place, he went quickly to see Frank H. Reed, one of the men who'd given him money the previous day. Reed was a prominent citizen, a civil engineer, and official town surveyor, and he listened thoughtfully to Reverend Wilson's story.
I know, Reverend Wilson. This town's had just about as much of Soapy Smith and his outlaws as it can stand.
Why hasn't he been stopped before? I'm sure it must have been one of his men who stole the money from me last night. I never realized till this morning what went on there.
He hasn't been stopped because he's bribed every lawman in town.
But the citizens...
He has the citizens bluffed. There's only one man who can stop him, and I'm leaving this afternoon to find him.
Who's that, Mr. Reed?
Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police.
Frank Reed succeeded in locating the Mountie in Circle City. And in Sergeant Preston's cabin there, he told him of the lawlessness that was rampant in Skagway.
I tell you, Sergeant, it's not safe for a man to travel the trails anymore. Soapy's highwaymen lay in wait at every turn for prospectors carrying dust.
Yes, I've heard a lot about Soapy Smith, Frank. But my authority doesn't extend beyond Chilkoot Summit.
Believe me, you're the only man who can stop him. I've been trying to organize the businessmen of the town, but we need a leader.
No, Frank, I'm afraid my hands are tied.
That's 2 disappointments I've had this trip.
Disappointments?
My lead dog was killed coming over the summit. A big, powerful Malamute.
Oh, that's too bad, Frank.
Yeah, I'm almost afraid to attempt the trip back without him. Funny how a man's completely dependent on his dogs in this country.
Well, you'll need a lead. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
I was planning to leave for Skagway myself. King and I'll go back with you. Of course, you realize that my being there has nothing to do with Smith. I can't act openly against him as long as he stays in Alaska.
The great dog, who'd stayed quietly at the Mountie's feet during the conversation, now stood by his chair. He raised his front paws and rested them on Preston's knees, listening to what he said.
That's great, Sergeant. That takes care of one of my disappointments anyway.
King isn't an ordinary dog, Frank. He's never failed me in any crisis. And I think affairs in Skagway are rapidly reaching that point. If there's any way to help you, perhaps King can do it.
As his name recurred in the conversation, the dog searched the Mountie's face, an ageless devotion shining in his eyes.
Yes, fella. We'll go back with Frank. Who knows? There may be some way to help him.
King knew Skagway well. He'd been there many times with Sergeant Preston. But this was different. He sensed the high tension in the men as they walked along the streets, huddling in groups, talking in quiet voices.
There'll be a meeting tonight, men, at 9 o'clock at the Sylvester Dock Warehouse.
Again and again, King heard them mention the name Soapy Smith. The Mountie talked about Smith, too, and from his tone of voice when he spoke of him, King knew whoever Soapy Smith was, he was no good. King had scented a dog at the edge of the crowd, standing beside a man who smelled strongly of cigar smoke and whiskey. The German police dog growled at the great husky, having long ago acquired the shallow bravado that was typical of Soapy Smith's gang. King recognized the dog as an inferior, and though he was conscious of his every move, he regally disdained to return the other's attention. Fritz saw the lean, muscular strength in the proud turn of the husky's head. He steeled himself to jump King, and as he did, the husky dodged him with a quickness that was second nature. Almost at the same moment, King nipped Fritz's ear sharply.
Fritz! Hey, Fritz! What's the matter with you? Come on, I've heard all I want to. We're going back to Soapy. Come on, I said.
Soapy. So the man and the dog were going to see the one called Soapy. King mulled the thought over in his head. He wished there was some way he could tell Sergeant Preston, who stood at the back of the crowd, out of earshot of the conversation. It was late that night, and as the men gathered at the warehouse, King scented the man and the dog he'd seen earlier that afternoon. Sergeant Preston was inside talking to some of the men, and King, who felt stifled indoors, walked to the edge of the dock. Through the open door, he could hear Reed giving orders to his men.
We'll place 4 guards outside the warehouse. I'll take my folks outside with 3 others in case Smith should show up. Now remember, men, if he appears armed, shoot him on sight.
Soapy Smith's henchman, Bill, also heard the orders.
I've already sent Soapy a note to come here, but this changes things. Write a note. Get a piece of paper. Be quiet, Fritz, be quiet. Now, you will be shot On sight. Stay in the saloon. Don't leave there. Bill. That does it. Now, Fritz, I'm going to put this in your collar. Take it to Soapy. Understand?
King watched the dog leave the dock, while Bill remained with the townspeople to keep his finger on the pulse of the excited crowd. He sensed that the man was either a gambler or an outlaw, and that the dog was on an errand that might mean trouble for Sergeant Preston and his friends. Making a quick decision, King left the dock after Fritz. The streets of Skagway were deserted as King loped along. He sighted Fritz, who had stopped at the sound of the Husky's approach. Here was a chance to get even with the one who'd nipped him that afternoon, and the German police dog was quick to seize the opportunity. But King's previous disdain had given way to a determination to destroy the note tucked in Fritz's collar. The Husky gave the dog no chance to take the offensive. King felt the sharpness of King's teeth at every turn. Quickly his bravado faded into fear, but he fought with a wily cunning. King had fought wild animals, whose agility and swiftness made them more worthy adversaries. He intended to waste no time with Fritz. With one powerful blow, King knocked him to the ground. Then, with his teeth, he pulled the note from Fritz's collar and made his way back to the dock. He chewed the note and dropped it in the street as he raced toward the crowd. At the dock, Soapy Smith walked rapidly past the two outer guards. Two revolvers hung from his belt, and a repeating Winchester lay in the crook of his arm. Behind him trailed a group of his henchmen.
Hey, wait a minute, Soapy. Where are you going?
There's Reed up ahead. I want to see him.
You can't come any further.
You're at the bottom of this trouble, Reed. If you'd kept your nose out of my business, I wouldn't have had to come down here to break up this little meeting.
As King approached, he saw Soapy Smith strike Frank Reed with the butt of the rifle.
Gosh.
And as Reed fell, one of the men in back of Smith raised a rifle to kill the man who'd fallen under the blow. King hurled himself at the gunman, whose finger was ready on the trigger.
Oh, the dog knocked my arm.
Almost immediately, King heard 8 other shots. 4 from Soapy's rifle and 4 from Reed's revolver. The gangster dropped where he stood.
Soapy. Hey, boys. He got Soapy. Let's beat it.
It was then, in the middle of a frenzied mob, that King caught a familiar scent. His heart leaped within him. Preston. It was Sergeant Preston.
King, old boy. Are you all right, fella?
For a moment, King forgot the excitement and murder that raged about him. For the space of seconds from the gunfire, King had feared for the Mounties' safety. His warm tongue touched the Mounties' beloved hand. And then, together, they walked to where Soapy had fallen. Reed was already surrounded by the townsmen.
You must be Sergeant Preston.
Yes, I am.
I'm afraid Mr. Reed's been wounded. We'll have to get him to a hospital at once. But, Sergeant, look at Soapy Smith.
Strange that Smith had come here, knowing the men were waiting for him with guns. Yes, King. Looks like the career of Soapy Smith is closed. When he walked in here, he walked to his death.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon.
On King! On you, Husky!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Corporal Standish was one of the youngest men on the force of the Northwest Mounted Police. He smiled to himself as he glanced at his 2 prisoners plodding along the frozen trail, Jack Snyder and Sam McLean, 2 of the wiliest criminals to set foot in the Yukon. With a sense of pride, he anticipated the satisfaction he'd experience when he marched them into headquarters. But fate sometimes cheats a man of a hard-earned victory. And even as Corporal Standish urged his team on confidently,
Smash you, Mallow! Smash!
Jack Snyder spoke guardedly to his partner.
At the rate we're traveling, both of us will be looking through bars mighty soon unless we make a break. Now listen. You got nothing to lose. They'll end up hanging both of us, and you know it.
Yeah? Seems like you and that Mountie have been kind of palsy. Maybe you figure he'll close his eyes and let us run away.
Well, I've been trying to make him think we're letting him take us in without any trouble.
Yeah, just two model prisoners.
Yeah, you're jittery. Losing your nerve and what little brains you had. You gotta be making camp in an hour or so. And when we bunk down for the night, watch me.
You mean you got something planned?
Don't I always? Just wait, Sam. Our friend the corporal's in for a big surprise.
Corporal Standish had been overconfident. The moment he relaxed his guard was all that Jack Snyder needed.
Stop him, Sam. Here. That's it. Grab the gun. I've got it. Take it easy, Monty.
You'll never get away with this, Snyder.
Yeah, you're wrong. We are getting away with it. I'll keep them covered while you get the sled set to my Sam.
Wait till I get this pack back on it.
The young Mountie stood watching Sam McLean load the supplies on the sled. Minutes dragged by, and then...
Everything ready?
Yeah, come on.
Right. So long, Corporal Standish. Sorry it was necessary to take your grub.
I'll catch up with you if it's the last thing I do.
Yeah, probably will be. You're miles from nowhere, Monty. And if the wolves don't get you, the cold will. Hey, get the dogs going, Sam.
Marsh, you Malamute.
See, Sam? Mounties have quite a reputation, but they're like all lawmen.
I'll give you credit for the break, Jack. Come on, Marsh. But I still think you should have dropped him.
Oh, it's better this way. If we'd have killed him, somebody would have found him. Maybe before we could get to Skagway. But as it is, he'll do a lot of wandering without dogs and no gun. And when and if he's found, it'll look like what you might call a natural death.
Marsh, you Malamute.
Corporal Standish had one thought as he walked along the moonlit trail.
Letting them slip through my fingers. I've got to get help. Find someone who'll lend me a sled.
The young policeman set a brisk pace for himself, realizing he must cover as much territory as possible while he had strength. In spite of himself, his heart sank with misgivings as he thought of the uneven odds. 2 men on a sled against the time he could make on foot. The Yukon wilderness was a land of wild beauty and brooding stillness. On a sled with a good pack of dogs, Corporal Standish had many times experienced an exhilaration in its loneliness. Now, he felt the terrible challenge it hurled. He remembered the men who died on the trails, unable to bear the cold and hardship of a merciless country. Doggedly, he kept walking, his feet aching and blistered in his boots. Daylight came. And then another day, and he began losing track of time.
Got to keep going. Can't stop. Keep going. My eyes, I feel like they're full of sand. Snow blindness. I thought I was heading for Preston's territory, but I might have lost my trail. It's hopeless. I'll never make it. But I'll keep going. Maybe Oh.
The great dog King tilted his nose in the sharp Yukon air.
On King! On you, hunt King! King's more often ahead of the dogs than with them. It's almost as if he... He's stopping. Let us catch up with him. All right, fella. What's the idea? Don't the dogs go fast enough to please you? What in the world? What are you listening for, boy?
But King wasn't listening. His sense of smell often told him things long before his ears picked up a sound. And now, he'd caught the scent of a man he recognized, a man Sergeant Preston knew. He glanced back toward the Mountie.
What is it, fellas?
In answer, King raced along the trail, knowing the Mountie would follow him.
On you, Husky!
King stopped beside the prostrate man minutes before the sled reached the spot. He recognized the Mountie's uniform and knew that when Preston found his friend, there'd be an explanation.
Oh, you Huskies, oh! Why, it's Standish. Well, he hasn't been wounded. But how could he have lost his sled?
Oh,
It's Preston, Stan.
Oh.
What happened?
Preston. Oh,
He's lost consciousness. Come on, fella. This looks bad, King. Mighty bad.
Sergeant Preston watched over the young policeman as he regained his strength. At intervals, Corporal Standish told his story until finally he completed it. Preston frowned, and King, who was quick to sense his master's thoughts, stood quietly beside him.
And I was bragging about my stripes. I'll be lucky if I don't lose them after this.
Get the dogs up, King. That's it, fella. You get the sled, Stan.
Where do we go from here, Sergeant?
We'll retrace your steps and see if we can't find some evidence of the direction they took.
If you ask me, they're heading straight for Skagway just as fast as my dogs can get them there.
At a camp beside a trail a few days later, Jack Snyder looked into the fire.
What's on your mind? No, Sam, it's just possible that Mountie got through to some help. What if he did? If he did, you know the first place we'd head for. Yeah? That's why we're laying low for a few days. Hey, now, wait a minute, Jack. We've got enough provisions. I say we ought to turn off here and stop at Fort Munn. We'll stock up, then much toward Juneau. Get a boat there. See what I mean? I don't know. Seems kind of risky to me. Well, it's a safer bet than walking into a trap at Skagway. If there is a trap, you should have dropped that, Molly. I told you that before we left. Well, we didn't. We can't go back now. Just remember, Sam, it was me that got us away from that lawman. And I ain't planning to walk into another one. Okay. You win. We'll turn off.
Early the next morning, the two fugitives turned off the trail and the heavy snow covered their tracks. Toward mid-afternoon, they made camp and together went out with the Mountie's rifle to look for some game. When they returned to their camp, the snow had stopped falling.
This is one night we won't have to settle for bacon. Good thing you dropped this dough. Yeah, be a chitty. Hey, Jack. Somebody's been here while we was gone. Somebody nothing. Here, look at these tracks. A bear. Well, I'll be... And he got into the grub. Made off with every last piece of bacon. Well, I was getting sick of eating it anyway. Add to the fire, will you?
Meanwhile, Sergeant Preston and Corporal Standish stopped at the point of the trail where Jack Snyder and Sam McLean had made a turn. The sergeant decided to make camp, and King raced through the timber, leaving the two policemen together. The snow was soft beneath his feet as he ran, his nose tilted in the air, sampling the scents of the wilderness. King enjoyed these runs by himself when he was free of the responsibility of keeping the team of dogs in line. Occasionally, he heard a twig snapping under the feet of an unseen animal. And then... But wait. What was that? King stopped, his lean, muscular body momentarily rigid. A bear. But with the scent of the bear came another scent. Bacon. Where would a bear find bacon in this wilderness unless he had gone into a man's camp and eaten man's food? The great dog knew the marauder-like habits of these animals, and his curiosity was aroused. No bear had broken into Sergeant Preston's rations. There must be another camp in the vicinity. He followed the bear tracks.
What was that? Huh? I could have sworn I saw something moving back near the timber. Looked like a wolf. Yeah, you're imagining things. A wolf? Maybe a dog. Wolves travel in packs, and so do dogs. Forget it.
As King raced back over the snow-covered country, his mind was in a turmoil. He knew that Sergeant Preston and the younger Mountie were trailing two men, This was the only camp within miles, he was sure. Could they be the men? The two he had seen sitting by the campfire? Preston would know.
What is it, boy? Hey, seems like he's trying to say something, Sergeant. Why, he's getting the team lined up. Hey, what is this anyway?
That's strange. He's lining them up, but I wonder why.
King knew the distance could be covered much faster in the sled, and he used every device he could think of to make the Mountie understand him.
I don't know what you're trying to say, King.
I never saw anything like it in my life. Taking your sleeve and leading you to the sled. Looks to me like he wants you to get ready to march.
Well, that seems to be it, huh, King?
But we've just made camp. Oh, whatever it is, it can wait.
Well, that's where you're wrong, Stan. Whatever it is, King thinks I should see it now. And that's what we're going to do.
King led the team to the small camp where Jack Snyder and Sam McLean sat by the fire. Too late, they recognized Corporal Standish as he approached them.
That's McLean and Snyder, Sergeant.
Jack, he followed us. I told you should have dropped. Shut up. All right, Monty. You've got us covered.
And this time, Snyder, I'm going to keep you covered.
It was a week later when Sergeant Preston walked into Inspector Maynard's office. And as his superior congratulated Corporal Standish, the young Mountie looked uncomfortable.
You've done a fine piece of work, Corporal. All goes to prove you deserve those stripes you won.
Sir, if it hadn't been for Sergeant Preston and his dog...
Sergeant? What do you mean, Standish?
I think, sir, that Corporal means that King and I made the trip with him. We met on the trail.
Is that so? Well, sometimes it helps having a friend with you on the trail. Gets lonesome at times.
Well, I'll be...
What's that, Corporal?
I said it does help, sir. Yes, it's a mighty big help. And I won't forget it, Sergeant.
Yes, King, old boy. The corporal's case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Edward Carson had been married to Stella Burns a year. It was a year that proved the skeptics wrong who'd called it an impossible match, saying Eddie would never settle down. It had been a year of thinking of someone else's happiness before his own. It had meant sacrifices, taking a job in her father's bank because Stella wanted him to. Young Carson thought of these things as he stood before his father-in-law's desk in a prominent city bank in the United States in 1875.
Eddie, you know what it would mean to Stella's mother if I were to be exposed in a scandal. The shock would kill her. And you know what Stella thinks of her mother.
Yeah, I know. But you should have thought that before.
I should have, I guess, but the damage is done. The bank examiners will be here in a week. You've got to help me, Eddie. You can go away. Stella would understand. I'd tell her why you left. All my life I've been a prominent citizen. She'd never be able to hold her head up if the story should get out.
Well, it'd be just as bad for her if her husband were branded a thief.
Not if she knew the truth.
A week later, when the story broke and Edward Carson was branded a thief, Frank Burns appeared to be stunned. In his large home, he spoke soothingly to his daughter Stella.
There now, Stella. It's no use crying. He was doing so well. But he always had a wild streak in him. I told you that when you married him. It's best to just forget about him. You make your home with Mother and me and forget about Eddie Carson.
It was months later, and in a dingy saloon on the waterfront, Eddie Carson, now known as John Smith, sat reading a newspaper.
Hey, Bill, come over here and see what Smith's reading. He's reading the society page of the newspaper. Says Mrs. Stella Carson died last night in St. Mary's Hospital. Her baby daughter...
Shut up, you drunken sailor.
What's the matter, Smitty? Ashamed of being caught reading the society page, huh? Oh, I read it all the time when I drink me spot of tea.
Shut up. Why, you... Maybe that'll teach you to mind your own business.
20 years passed, and in Frank Burns' house, the old man sent for his granddaughter.
It's about your father. You know the story of what happened.
Yes, I know.
Well, I'm going to tell you the truth about it. Stella, he never took that money.
What?
I took it. I'd made a lot of bad investments.
Yes, but they told me he left a note.
He took the blame to cover up for me.
Did my mother know that? Did you tell her before she died?
No, I didn't tell her.
You mean she died believing my father was a thief when all the time he'd been shielding you?
Well, I meant to tell her, but...
But you didn't.
Stella, if ever a man paid for what he did, I have.
Paid? Well, you've had security and comfort all this time, but what about my father?
Security? I haven't had a penny I could call my own these last 20 years.
Well, what have we been living on?
We've been living on the money your father sent.
Where did he send it from?
All over. He sent money from the Argentine, Singapore, Madagascar, the East Indies, Amsterdam.
But where was he when you last heard from him? How long ago was it?
About 2 months ago.
Well, where was he then? Grandfather, please. Where was he then?
Open the first drawer, the chest over there. That's where I put the envelope. You see it? Where is it postmarked?
Postmarked Dawson. Yukon territory.
Several months had passed. Stella Carson's determination to find her father had led her to the Yukon. In Dawson, she found no trace of Edward Carson and had moved on further inland to Clover City, where she talked to Sergeant Preston. Eddie Carson, who still was known simply as John Smith, owned the Black Ace Saloon, and he sat in a back room with a bottle of whiskey at his elbow as the Mountie talked to him. 20 years had made many changes in the appearance of the man who'd lived in different climates in countries all over the globe. Slowly, he reached for the whiskey to refill his glass.
Drink, Sergeant?
Oh, no, thanks, John. What about all this? I've been watching you ever since that girl came to town. I've never seen you show an interest in any individual before, man or woman. Miss Carson is young. About 20, I imagine. Young enough, John, to be your daughter.
All right. You seem to have put everything together. Maybe you've guessed the truth.
I knew the truth, John, when you signed the mine over to her. You aren't usually so
generous? Did you tell her?
Of course not. Your secret is your own. So far as she knows, you were just making a gesture to a young girl who's apparently alone in the world. She probably chalked it up to a drunken whim of yours. I don't think she even knows the value of the mine.
Well, it's rich enough to take care of her all her life.
But the most important thing to her is to find her father.
That's no use, Sergeant. You don't understand. You said she probably thought my turning the mine over to her was a drunken gesture. You're right. If she thinks of me at all, she thinks of me as a broken-down old fool.
No. No, John, that isn't true.
Sure it's true. Don't you think I've known it? She feels sorry for me. 20 years is a long time. I've done too many things. That's no use. You can't go back.
Well, we should think it over.
I have thought it over. I've been a lucky man, Sergeant. I've lived long enough to see my daughter. It's more than I've ever hoped for.
The word that Stella Carson now owned the Moonbeam Mines got around quickly in Clover City. In the front of the saloon, two men sat at a table. Al Lawson's forehead was creased with a deep frown.
Listen, Sam, I don't know what this is all about.
I don't have time to tell you. We've had our eyes on the Moonbeam for a long time.
Yeah, sure, but it
No
don't...
buts, Sam. My plan works out, we'll have it. Shut up, here she comes.
Mr. Ellison?
Oh, yes, This is Mr. Lawson, ma'am. Here, let me help you.
Thank you.
I understand you come up here to the Yukon to look for your father, Edward Carson.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I think me and Al can help you out.
You can?
You see, we met a man named Carson about 2 months ago in Barlow Rapids. Now, it's kind of a hard sort of place to get to, but Al and me could get you up there.
Oh, I can hardly believe it.
Yeah, I guess it is good news. You've been looking for him for quite a while.
How soon can we start?
Just as soon as you're ready.
I can be ready in 20 minutes.
Fine. Now, you meet Al and me at the north end of town. Ought to be dark by then, but we know the trail.
All right, I'll see you then.
Later, Stella Carson came down the stairs of the Black Ace.
Hello there, Mr. Smith.
Well, you're looking very happy about something, Miss Carson.
Oh, I am happy. I've just been talking to two men who are going to take me to my father.
What?
They said they saw him at a place called Barlow Rapids. I'm going to meet them now at the north end of town.
Oh, I see. They must have been the fellows who stopped in here a few minutes ago.
They did?
Yes. They said you should meet them at the Mounties cabin instead. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I see. Well, wish me luck, Mr. Smith.
I do, Stella. I wish you luck always. With all my heart.
At Sergeant Preston's cabin, the Mountie was amazed as Stella Carson told him her reason for being there. King, standing close to his master, listened to the conversation.
And you say Smith told you to come here, instead of meeting the two men as you'd arranged?
Yes, he said they told him to give me that message.
I see.
Well, where are you going, Sergeant?
To the north end of town. Come on, King.
Wait for me.
Darkness had settled over Clover City, and at the north end of town, two men dragged a limp figure toward the river's edge.
How do you suppose he knew what we were up to? I don't know. Should have made a mistake when he told us to clear out of town. Well, he's unconscious now. Never knew what hit him when you stopped with the butt of your gun. Come on. That group of trees will keep anybody from seeing us. But I want to get him under the ice.
Meanwhile, Sergeant Preston, Stella Carson, and the great dog King had approached the point the two men had designated as a meeting place. Darkness made it impossible to see the trail. King caught the scent, and slowly, with a suppressed excitement, he padded about in the snow to find in which direction the trail led.
What is it, boy? Yes, I know you're here, fella.
But King hadn't caught the Mountie's hand in his teeth simply to make his presence known. Persistently, he pulled his arm.
What's he making all that noise for, Sergeant?
I don't know. Hey there, King. He put his weight against my legs and seems to be pushing me. That's it. He wants us to head toward the river.
As the two men reached the river's edge, Al Lawson held a match to a lantern he carried. The flame burned low, but threw enough light for them to test the ice.
Put the lantern down on the bank, Al. I want to get this over with and be out of here before any... What the... A dog!
Don't pay any attention to him. You head back to town.
Well, that Carson girl's going to be wondering why we ain't up on the
He
trail.
knows why you're not on the trail. Put up your hands, both of you.
Sam, it's a mountain.
Sergeant, it's Mr. Smith. Why, they've beaten
Are these
him
the
to
two men you were supposed to meet, Miss Carson?
Why, yes, but I don't understand all this.
All the pieces fit together. These men probably knew you owned the Moonbeam mine. They were planning to force you to sign it over to them.
It was all his idea. He said we could get her to sign it over and then do away with it.
Why, you dirty double-crosser.
How? Why did they beat Mr. Smith? I don't
You
understand.
told me you mentioned to him about your intended trip.
Yes?
He knew your father couldn't possibly be in Barlow Rapids. You see, he's your father.
What?
He's coming around now. You two are under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to defraud.
Sergeant, is she all right?
Yes, I'm all right. Father.
Oh, Stella.
It's all right, Dad. It's all right.
Yes, King, old boy. Everything is all right. Thanks to you, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit. And all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. The wild beauty of the Yukon stretched out before Sam Bartlett, an aged trapper, as he stood in front of his cabin. His eyes swept the stillness of the snow-covered country in a quick, appreciative glance. And then suddenly, he stiffened. Behind him, a twig snapped, and from force of habit, he raised the rifle laying in the crook of his arm. Bartlett was trapped between two men, both of them armed.
Look out, he's going to shoot! Get him!
Benny, what have I done?
Looks like you dropped him all right, kid.
Benny, is he dead?
Sure he is.
Oh.
And you killed him.
No, I didn't mean... You shouted. I lost my head. Benny, you have to believe me. There were two shots. I heard them.
The other shot you heard was from Bartlett's gun.
But I did not know. When I was indebted to you, you told me there was a way to make money quick. I did not think to murder. It was an accident. I tell you, it was an accident.
Don't worry, kid. I believe you.
You will tell the police that it was an accident?
There ain't no reason why the police should know about Bartlett stopping a bullet of yours.
Oh, no. No, Manny. If I tell them how it happened, he raised his gun.
You won't tell them nothing. It's your word against mine, see? You'll hang, Pierre, if I tell how it happened.
Oh, Ivan. My poor Ivan.
I was going to let you act as a driver for me, figuring it might work out long as you didn't know too much about my business. Now, if you want to save your neck, I guess I can trust you to keep your mouth shut. Come on. Let's take those pelts the old man's got stored in the sled and clear out of here.
The Golden Horseshoe Saloon in Higbee City got its name from the huge good luck piece hanging over the bar. When Olaf Swenson first put it there, men laughed at it, talked about it, and wished on it. Now, the conversation-hungry prospectors found a new topic for discussion. For Olaf, the owner of the saloon, walked among them wearing a bright plaid coat with the naive joy of a child with a new toy. It was hours after Pierre Duval's unwilling participation in the murder of Sam Bartlett. Manny Winslow stood at the bar, while Pierre sat at a table, looking glumly at the glass in his hand. Yvonne, a singer in the saloon, sat down beside him. As the two young people talked, Pierre Duval lowered his voice, leaning across the table to speak. Listening to him, Yvonne went deathly white, her eyes widening in horror and fear. It was at that moment Sergeant Preston entered the saloon. His eyes roved about the room quickly as he glanced at the faces of the men. Olaf Swenson's face seemed hardly broad enough to hold the smile of welcome that creased it.
Hello there, Olaf.
Hey, yes, Sergeant Preston. I've been glad you come to Golden Horseshoe. It seemed like long time since you've been here yet, huh?
Olaf, aren't you warm with your coat on in here?
You like me in coat, Sergeant? It's yours new. Hey, Curly, I bet you've never seen one like it in whole Yukon, eh? I'm going out to my brothers in a little while soon yet. Maybe tonight, huh?
You certainly have a lot of colors in it. Pete hasn't seen it yet. He's in for a big surprise.
Yeah. Look at the lining. I want you to see. Yeah, been good, warm for Olaf. Sergeant, you are my friend. I am happy to see you like I would be my own brother. You stay in town, huh, for a little time?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, Olaf.
No?
Maybe a few days, maybe longer. I've just come from Sam Bartlett's place.
Ah, how is Sam? Hey, Curly, I was just saying today, I would like for him to come to see my new coat I've been bought.
He won't be in today or any other day, Olaf. He's been murdered.
Huh?
And I'm out to find the murderer.
It was much later that night, and in the small cabin that served as temporary headquarters for Sergeant Preston, the Mountie listened intently to Pierre Duval's story. Yvonne sat beside him, her face strained and anxious, the glittering spangles on her dress reflecting the light of the oil lamp on the policeman's makeshift desk.
So that was why you wanted to see me, Pierre?
Yes. Now you know the truth.
I saw Manny Winslow in the saloon tonight. He's probably staying at the hotel.
I don't think he intended to tell me about stealing pelts and hiding them away. But when Bartlett was murdered...
He figured he could depend on you to keep quiet as long as he held the threat of exposure in his hand.
Yes.
Pierre said he would give himself to the authorities before he would go on speeding. Maybe killing more people.
You say you saw Sam Bartlett raise his rifle.
My word of honor, Sergeant. I was looking at him. He pointed it at me.
I'm putting you in jail, Pierre. Then I'll go after Manny Winslow.
It is he who is responsible. He is a wicked man, Sergeant.
Yvonne, I've been trailing him for many months. I've never been able to get proof of the robberies he's been committing. But now Manny Winslow is going to pay for his crimes. And pay plenty.
As Sergeant Preston walked the short distance with Pierre Duval to the small jail, the great dog King walked at the Mountie's side. Padding along in the snow, he thought briefly of the conversation he'd heard inside the cabin. To King, it meant little. And then suddenly, King paused, glancing up at the Mountie. But Preston seemed to be lost in thought, and King realized that his master was not aware of the figure watching from the shadow of several frame buildings. The light from the cabin made the Mountie and Pierre plainly visible, but the mysterious observer was shrouded from view. The jail door closed behind Pierre Duval and Sergeant Preston. As King raced toward the line of buildings, his curiosity aroused. Muttering to himself, Manny Winslow at first didn't see the dog.
No, he talked. The yellow skunk. Of all times for that Mountie to hit town, and it would be Preston. Yeah. Well, Sergeant, I've heard a lot about you and that mutt of yours, and it's going to be a real pleasure to pull the wool over your eyes. What? That must be the Mountie's dog.
King heard the ugly edge in the man's voice as he mouthed Preston's name. Almost at the same moment, he sensed the man's quick movement. Dodging swiftly, the great dog narrowly missed being struck by the barrel of the rifle Winslow swung.
Get out of here, you dumb mutt. Go on, beat it.
Reluctantly, King turned, running back to Sergeant Preston.
Hey, fella! Hey,
After his encounter with King, Manny Winslow had walked quickly to the back of the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. He saw Olaf's sled harnessed and knew that the big suite had not yet left for his brothers. The saloon was quiet and empty as Olaf stepped out into the night.
It is good hot.
Winslow swung his rifle for the second time in the space of a half hour.
Better tie him up. He won't be out long.
Winslow worked quickly. He dragged Olaf Swenson's inert form back into the emptied room of the saloon. Once inside, he took the plaid coat from the Swede, bound his hands and feet, gagged him, and smiled as he pulled the coat over his own Mackinaw.
Thanks for the coat, Swenson. If you'd have kept that big mouth of yours shut about going out to your brothers, I wouldn't be able to get out of town without that Mountie spotting me. Even with a moon out, he'll take one look at the coat and I'll be all right. I'll fool the Mountie and that dumb pooch of his at the same time.
Leaving Higbee City's one hotel, Sergeant Preston frowned.
The clerk says he hasn't been in, fella. He either suspects Pierre came to me with his story and has left town, or he doesn't know we're looking for him.
Man and dog walked along the moonlit street. King's ears stood up sharply when he heard the sled pulling away from the back of the saloon. Sergeant Preston looked up to see a great figure in a plaid coat head toward the northern trail.
Well, King, old boy, there goes Olaf.
Olaf? King glanced at Preston.
Olaf's so proud of that coat of his, he's taking to the trail at this hour to show it off.
The great dog looked after the sled as it moved toward the town's outskirts. In the light of the moon, King saw the man, and the coat that to Sergeant Preston's eyes was so gaudily colored appeared to the dog as so many varying shades of gray. The scent King caught was not the scent of the man Preston called Olaf. King knew Olaf. Olaf was a friend of his master's. But the one who had struck out at him in the darkness such a short time before proved himself an enemy. He was puzzled. It was odd that Preston should have mistaken this man for Olaf.
What's wrong, fella?
Impulsively, King raced after the sled, stretching his legs in a long, powerful stride. Why had the man wanted to watch Preston without being seen? As King ran, he determined Sergeant Preston should know the man in the sled was not a friend. In one leap, King was on the man, throwing him off balance, and together they fell in the snow.
Hey, a dog! The sled! Our rifles on the sled. The dumb must have kept on running.
Sergeant Preston had been amazed as he saw King race after the sled. When he saw King jump the man, he ran toward him.
King boy! Get off of me! I had my gun.
Wait a minute. Winslow. All right, King. Quiet, boy.
This dumb mud of yours tried to...
You're covered, Manny. You can turn around right now and walk toward the jail.
In Higbee City Jail, a half hour later, Sergeant Preston faced his two prisoners.
You admit you stole Bartlett's pelts in Winslow?
Yeah, I admit that, all right. But that's all you can pin on me, Monty.
Where were you when Pierre fired at Bartlett?
He was in back of Bartlett.
I'll answer my own questions, punk. Yeah, I saw it all. I was in back of Bartlett.
Pierre says there were two shots.
One from his gun and one from the old man.
No, Manny, not from the old man's. From yours. Pierre's bullet never hit Sam Bartlett. He died with a bullet in his back.
What?
Bartlett's gun hadn't been fired. I found him about 2 hours after the murder. So by your own admission, you were behind him, Winslow. I arrest you for the murder of Sam Bartlett.
Oh, I cannot believe my ears. I must tell Yvonne.
You'll have to tell your story to a jury, Pierre. But I have a hunch your sentence for participating in the robbery will be light.
The two prisoners were locked in their cells when Sergeant Preston turned to King. The great dog had not known whether the Mountie would reprimand him for jumping the man on the sled. And as he watched the sergeant talk to Pierre and Winslow, he began to think he'd been right to try to make the Mountie see the identity of the man he thought to be Olaf. And now, with Preston patting his head, King was sure.
King, old boy, I owe you an apology. I thought you'd made a mistake. You thought he'd fool us with a plaid coat. And he did fool me. But Manny forgot that dogs are colorblind. That rainbow didn't mean anything to you, did it?
Just now I get off my ropes. Here, that Winslow, here. Why, Sergeant, why you grin at me so like that for?
Winslow's locked up, Olaf. And your coat's safe. It's over on the chair.
Min coat ain't been stolen.
You have King to thank for it.
Well, by yumpin' Yemeni.
Yes, King, old boy. Thanks to you, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit. And all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. The Palace Cafe in Dolphin City was owned by Belle Brady, a woman as beautiful as she was shrewd, and beautiful women were not seen often in the Yukon in 1898. She sat listening to a well-dressed man, the light of the oil lamp shining on her flawless skin and catching the glitter of the diamond sparkling at her throat and wrist. At intervals, her eyes moved to the door of the cafe, sweeping over the tables where men were playing faro and chuck-a-luck for fabulous steaks.
Well, you're not listening to me.
Sure, I heard what you said, Nate. I've heard that story so often I could feel it off myself. Almost word for word.
No. This time it's different, Belle. I tell you, this claim is the richest that's ever been found on the Yukon. Why, it'll turn up so much pay dirt, it'll make your investment the best thing that ever happened to you.
What investment?
Your investment in the claim. Why, with you to grub stake me, honey...
Now, wait a minute. You're putting the cart before the horse. I'm not grub staking you this time.
Now, Belle, you're kidding. Well, you could sell that rock you got on your little finger and never miss it. I don't need much.
Now, last time I staked you, you lost the money in poker. Time before that, you met some friends of yours. Celebrating in Dawson ain't my idea of digging for pay dirt, Nate. I'm interested in charity, but...
Charity? Why, you... Maybe if the Mountie come to you asking to be staked, it'd be a different thing, huh?
Sergeant Preston is a gentleman, and what's more, he's honest.
A 2-year-old could see you're sweet on him, Belle. The belle of the palace. Throwing her heart away on a Mountie that won't even look at her.
Yeah? Well, that's no my business, Date. You open your mouth around here once more, and I'll see that you're thrown out of the place.
You're going to be sorry for this, Belle. I'm not forgetting it.
See that you don't. You better have dust in your pocket. Those drinks aren't on the house. Did you see anything of Sergeant Preston, Shorty?
Not yet.
Thanks. Oh, there he is now. Glad you could come, Sergeant.
We'd have been here sooner, but Padre couldn't get away.
How are you, Belle?
Can't complain, Padre. Come on over here. I want to talk to both of you. You see, it's like this. I've made a lot of money up here, and by your books, Padre, I guess I haven't been any saint. The way I feel, this country's done a lot for me, and I want to, well, do something for it.
Why, what do you mean, Belle?
Don't know how to go about it or what to do. I sent for you two because I figured you'd know what's needed. I got the cash, and I'll put it in any charity or improvement you agree on.
That's a marvelous gesture, child. And if I might suggest something...
Go ahead, Padre. I was hoping you'd have something to say.
I've known of countless hundreds of men and women who've died of starvation on the remote trails up here. On the more traveled routes, of course, the cases are rare. But if we could establish points along those remote trails where men and women could find food, it would be a great thing. It would save a lot of lives.
You're right, Padre.
You both agree on it, then that's what I'll do. I'll give you the money, and you can go ahead.
Well, it costs quite a bit.
I don't care how much it costs. You and the sergeant here can kind of map out the places where it'd be best to put the food. I'll worry about the rest.
Your unselfishness is very commendable, Belle.
Not much, Padre. Us Bradys never forget a good turn. Yukon's been good to me.
Well, Sergeant, I think the best thing to do would be for us to set up the food caches together. You're more familiar with the trails than I am.
I can be ready to start whenever you are.
I'd like to get going on it immediately.
All right. King and I can be set to mush tomorrow morning if it's convenient with you.
Fine. I'll see you in the morning about 7 o'clock.
Right.
Well, I've got to get back to my cabin.
Good night, Padre.
Good night, brother.
Good night to both of you.
Yep. Well, I think I'll be leaving, too. King and I are going to help on that job of yours, Bill. We have a lot of preparations to make.
Can't they wait? It isn't often I have the chance to talk to you. Besides, I didn't get all dolled up tonight just to show my new dress to the boys.
Well, there's one of them over there who seems very impressed with it.
Nate? He doesn't matter.
We'll stop by to see you before leaving in the morning. Come on, fella.
All right, Sergeant. Good night.
Good night, Bill.
I wasn't very impressed with your generosity. I'd call that a brush-off.
Yeah? Well, nobody's asking your opinion, Nate.
Well, I'm giving it, see. You're willing to feed the hungry lady bountiful, but you won't grub steak me. I'll remember that. And you can take it from me. The Mounty's gonna regret the day he ever laid eyes on you.
A week after Preston and the Padre left Dolphin City, the Mountie halted his dogs on the trail.
Ho, King. Ho, you huskies. Well, Padre, I guess this is where I leave you. You'll be heading back to Dolphin City.
That's right, Sergeant. I'll miss your company in the return trip, but I suppose we'll meet in town soon again.
Well, King and I'll be there in about 9 days, I think. We ought to have enough supplies, but in case we run low, we'll pick some up along the trail.
Exactly what I plan to do. I'll cover ground faster if I don't load the sled with a lot of food. Well, goodbye, Sergeant. Good luck to you.
Thanks, Padre. Same to you. All right, fella.
On King! On you huskies!
The Padre turned his sled around and headed back along the trail, while Sergeant Preston, with King leading his dogs, continued toward the country of the Yukon Indians. 2 days passed, and the Mountie retraced his way along the trail, unaware of the situation that the Padre was even that moment facing, as he stopped at one of the places where supplies had been left the week before.
I don't understand this. Every place I've stopped expecting to find food has been completely bare. Almost as if someone were systematically looting the place. Oh, no, couldn't be that. No one would steal food, every last bit of it. Yet I know it isn't possible for so much food to disappear in a few days. Well, I'll just keep going. Perhaps I'll find some at Logan's Rock.
But at Logan's Rock, there was no food. Nothing had been left. The Padre strained his eyes over the glare of the snow and tried to ignore the hunger he felt.
Dogs can't keep going much longer. I must reach the cabin. It can't be more than 50 miles from here. Surely there'll be something to eat there.
With the courage born of an inner strength, he urged his dogs on. And then, as the cabin loomed before him, he saw smoke coming from the chimney. Approaching, he recognized the supplies stacked outside the door. Slowly, he walked past them.
Who's that? Well, it ain't the Padre. Looking kind of peaked, too. Come on in and shut the door.
Why are you holding a gun on me?
Just a bit of self-protection, that's all.
I'm not armed, Mr. Silvers. There's no need of that. I want to know what those supplies are doing stacked outside the cabin.
Yeah, I figured you'd ask that question. I'm kind of settling a personal grudge. As soon as the ice breaks, I'll put them in a boat and take them down the river. Make some money on the deal.
No.
That's what I'm going to do, Padre. Neither you nor the money will stop me.
For a second, the Padre thought of the men he'd known who died of starvation on long and bitter trails. And his heart was filled with a fury against the man whose selfishness might deprive others of their lives. His first impulse was to disarm him. Moving quickly, he caught Nate Silvers by surprise.
Boy, I'll show you. You can't. The lamp is busted. The place will be on fire.
I'll bring you with this chair, you meddling fool.
Oh.
Now to get out of here.
Before I'm burned alive.
A few moments later, King, running far ahead of Sergeant Preston's pack of dogs, saw Nate Silvers come from the burning cabin. The man carried the gun he had picked up from the floor after he struck the Padre. King jumped, knocking the gun from his hand. Realizing that the Mountie was near the cabin, Nate Silvers ran to where his dogs and sled were waiting.
Mush, you husky! Mush!
And as King hesitated, the sled disappeared through the timber. The great dog sensed that the man who had carried the gun was trying to evade Preston.
Oh, you husky! Oh! King, did you hear that? That's the Padre. We've got to get him out of there.
King felt that Preston should know about the man who had just fled through the trees. But he sensed, too, that his master's first concern was for his friend trapped inside the blazing cabin. Instantly, he raced toward the building. The smoke was suffocating. The great dog's eyes blurred momentarily. And in the fury of the fire, he stopped, trying to locate the Padre.
Help!
In all his days on the trail, King had never faced such an experience. His feet were scorched as he made his way over to where the trapped man lay on the floor, pulling himself through the smoke. Just as the dog reached him, the man's strength seemed exhausted. He was motionless. And the dog's heart sank with the heavy fear that this friend of his master's might be dead. Slowly, with his teeth in the Padre's coat, King pulled him back toward the door. It was a half hour later. The cabin was a smoldering ruin, but the Mountie, the Padre, and the great dog were safe outside.
He saved my life, Sergeant.
I know, Padre. Good fella, King.
But Silvers, where'd he go?
I found tracks in his gun at the back of the cabin. He's managed to make a getaway. But we're going after him.
And the supplies?
The fire never touched them. As soon as we find Silvers, we'll put them back on the trail. From what you've told me, Padre, that man has a lot to answer for.
King was soon leading Preston's pack of huskies over the trail Silvers had taken. The Padre traveled in the sled while the Mountie rode the runners. 4 days passed, and at a point where the trail turned sharply, King stopped over the body of a man who'd fallen in the snow.
Silvers, Padre.
Oh, is he?
Yes, he's dead. No sign of his sled or dogs. He was on the trail a long time, but it wasn't the cold that killed him.
The mills grind slow, but they grind exceeding small.
Slow? Yes, it was a slow death of starvation for Nate Silvers. When he looted the supplies along the trail, he cut himself off from all food. He was too weak to go any farther. And the cold finished what his greed began. It was a week later.
The Padre and the Mountie had made their way back along the trail, restocking the places they had set up for hungry travelers. And at the Palace Cafe in Dolphin City, Belle Brady listened to their story.
I'd never have asked you to do it if I'd known you might have been killed because of a little food.
Little food, child. Remember, a bit of food might have saved Nate Silver's life. He was only one man, Belle. Others will need food just as much, but they'll be different. They'll bless your generosity.
And the Padre was right. Around the warmth of pot-bellied stoves throughout the great North Country, the story was told and retold of how a valiant dog saved the life of one of the men who'd made Belle Brady's unselfish wish a reality. And though the story grew until it became almost a legend, the dog with the devoted heart was deaf to the praise of all men, save one.
Yes, King, old boy. You did a great job.
copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network.
The Challenge of the Yukon.
King of you Husky!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. In the headquarters of the Northwest Mounted Police, Sergeant Preston stood listening to his superior officer, Inspector Maynard. The older man frowned as he spoke.
Alaska had Soapy Smith. The Yukon has Manny Reynolds. Sergeant, he must be stopped.
Yes, you're right.
As a leader of organized gangsterism, he terrorizes prospectors and trappers who are carrying gold dust and valuable furs along the remote trails. And he's clever. He's wanted for murder and robberies. As you know, we've been trying to catch up with him for the last 6 months.
Every outlaw makes at least one mistake, Inspector. That mistake is usually enough to hang him.
Well, I hope you're right. I suppose there's a reason why outlaws like Reynolds operate in the Yukon. Besides being a place of great wealth, the country's so big, they feel the law won't be able to touch them. I can't give you a definite lead on Reynolds. All you have to go on is the list I gave you.
Well, that gives me an idea of where he's been, anyway. I'll start to work on it immediately.
And we'll do everything possible to help you. If you want a man to work with you...
Well, thanks, Inspector. I have all the help I'll need.
Who do you plan to take with you?
King.
King? Oh, yes. I know of your attachment to your dog, Sergeant, but I'm talking
about... You don't
about...
understand, sir. King and I have been working together for a long time. He's more valuable to me than anyone else could ever be.
Well, I won't interfere with whatever plans you have. I certainly hope you aren't making a mistake. A dog in this country is a beast of burden. A fine, splendid animal that's place. But in a case like this, I don't know.
We'll see, Inspector. We'll see.
As Sergeant Preston left police headquarters, the great dog King followed close at his heels. The Mounties' blue eyes narrowed.
Well, that list Inspector Maynard gave us is something to start on, fella. As I see it, Manny Reynolds is slowly working west. He's pulled jobs in several towns and along trails that seem to indicate that's what he has in mind. So we'll head towards Seahorse City, King. And perhaps before long we'll find a more definite clue.
A few days later, in the bank in Seahorse City.
Yes, sir, gents. What can I do for you?
This is a hold-up, partner. Unless you want to get hurt-handed with the dust in that drawer.
What? Why, you...
Quick about it. Pete, you and Sam lift the dust out of the safe.
Yeah, sure, Manny.
All right. What are you stalling for?
I was just going out, Manny. He's got a gun.
You all right? I'm all right. He got my arm. That small-time pen pusher ain't going to reach for any more guns. Get that dust and let's march.
In Seahorse City, late the next night, young Dr. Wells sat talking to his wife. the light from the oil lamp flickering and casting weird shadows along the walls of the snug cabin.
So they got away, Fred?
Yes. And the only man who could identify them died with a bullet through his heart. I don't know, Molly. I don't know why the law doesn't stop this sort of thing.
They will be stopped. They must be. People are always punished. What was that?
What?
I thought I heard something outside.
You see what I mean? You can't feel safe even in your own cabin. There's only some way to find Sergeant Preston.
It's been a long time since we've seen him in Seahorse.
Yes, and he's never been needed more.
Freddie!
Be quiet, lady. I ain't carrying this gun just for show.
What do you want? We have no money here. You're wasting your time.
You're the sawbones here, ain't you?
Yes, I'm a doctor.
Well, I got a job for you to do. Put on your Mackinac and step lively.
Oh, wait a minute.
Like I said, Doc, I don't carry this gun for show. Coming with me, see? You act sensible, ain't no one gonna get hurt.
Fred, maybe you'd better go with him.
All right.
All right. I'll go with you.
Who's sick?
Ain't exactly a case of sickness. Now, lady, you want to see your husband get back here, you keep your mouth shut about my little visit, see?
You don't have to threaten me, you hoodlum. If you dare harm my husband, I'll have you hunted down, no matter where you take him.
Ain't nobody gonna be hunted down. What happens to him is up to you.
I'll be all right, honey.
Now, come on. We've wasted enough time already.
Goodbye, Molly. And don't worry.
Be careful, darling.
Where are you taking me?
I'm putting this bandana over your eyes so you can't see where I'm taking you. Might as well tell you, Doc. You have to dig a bullet out of a fella's arm. That's all you got to do. Now get in the sled. All right. Must you, Husky? Must! I'm telling you, before you get any ideas in your head. If you don't do a good job, you get paid off in lead.
It was a few hours later. Sergeant Preston halted his dogs in front of Fred Wells' cabin in Seahorse City.
Okay, go, you Huskies. All right, fella, let's go in to see the doctor.
Sergeant Preston.
Molly, what's wrong?
Oh, come in, Sergeant, please. I'm sorry.
Well, is there anything I can do?
Maybe you'll know what to do.
Sergeant Preston listened to Molly Wells' story and frowned. She told him of the robbery and murder in the bank a few days before, and of the man who visited the cabin, forcing the doctor to go with him.
He threatened to kill Fred if I told anyone. Where are you going?
There'll be tracks in the snow, Molly. King and I'll follow them.
But if you do, you're endangering Fred's life. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have told you.
You'll just have to trust me, Molly. Come on, King. We might have a long trail ahead of us, but I have a hunch we'll find what we set out for at the end of it.
At Manny Reynolds' cleverly concealed hideout miles north of Seahorse City, Fred Wells worked on the wounded outlaw's arm. Reynolds himself was far from a desirable patient because, like all men of his kind, his reaction to pain was that of a coward.
What are you?
You want me to get this bullet out, so keep quiet. You, over there.
Yeah?
Hold his arm.
Pete.
Yeah, boss, I'm here.
I just saw something. You might have been followed when you left Seahorse City.
No, we wasn't. I took care of all that.
You and... Take it easy, Doc. You and Lefty go out on the trail and keep watch, you hear?
It's freezing cold out there, man.
Freezing or not, I ain't taking any chances. The doctor's wife might have told somebody you brought him out here.
Oh, you low-living, suspicious devil. You don't have to be
You keep
afraid.
out of this. We'll settle with you later. The reason me and the boys ain't never seen the inside of a jail is because Manny Reynolds is always ready for trouble a long time before it comes. You know what to do, Pete?
Yeah. I know what to do.
When Sergeant Preston came into view far down a shallow valley, he and his dogs were sharply outlined on the moonlit trail. The two outlaws, serving as lookouts, acted quickly.
Who's this fella?
King caught the scent of the two men as he sampled the sharp Yukon air.
Oh, I see. Someone dropped on the trail. Perhaps he's been... Ho, you huskies! Ho!
The Mountie walked toward the motionless figure in the snow. As he bent low to examine the man, Pete's feet shot up suddenly, catching the policeman off guard. At the same moment, Lefty came from behind the protection of a huge rock. Like a streak of lightning, King threw himself on the two men. Furiously, he fought them, sinking his teeth into their hands and clothing.
Now get that bastard dog!
King dodged, and his one thought was to get to his master.
King! King, they'll kill you, boy! Go on, King! Away!
For a moment, the great dog hesitated. He didn't understand Preston's sharp command. Why did he order him away?
Do you hear me, King? Away!
Slowly, with a heavy heart, King loped toward the timber. Always, he'd obeyed Preston's commands blindly.
Well, if it ain't the Mountie. Lefty, wait till Manny sees what we got.
So you two got the drop on Sergeant Preston. I never expected we'd have the pleasure of holding a gun on you, Monty.
You wouldn't have, Reynolds, if your man here hadn't done such a good job of playing dead. Well, you're holding the cards. What do you plan to do?
How'd you find us? Who directed you to this place? Old talk, huh? Maybe it was the doctor's wife.
And just maybe, Manny. Maybe I didn't stop in Seahorse City.
Sergeant, you shouldn't have come here.
Seems we're outnumbered anyway.
Sawbones is right, Muddy. You never should have come here.
What are you going to do, Manny?
There's only one thing to do. Kill him.
Hey, now, it's suicide to kill a Mountie.
Yeah, it is, Manny.
Maybe you boys don't know as much about Preston as I do. He was the one that was responsible for Whitey McLaughlin getting it in the neck.
And Whitey was a friend of yours?
Yeah, good friend. If we don't get you, you'll get us, right?
That's right. I set out to find you, and I have.
It would have been better for you if you hadn't.
You can't get away with this.
Your job here's done, Doc, so keep quiet. Or you'll get what we're going to give the money.
You know, Mountie, it seems to me you're making a mistake.
Yeah?
A mistake of overconfidence.
I'll hand it to you, all right. You're plenty cool. Just what do you mean?
You don't think that dog of yours is going to save you, Mountie?
Even as Sergeant Preston whistled for King, the sharp whistle that had always been a signal between the two of them, the Mountie wondered and hoped. And as King waited outside the cabin, he heard. He'd waited. A powerful bond that was like a magnet held him to the place where Preston was. He'd waited. And as King heard his master calling him, he knew why. This was what he'd been listening for. He looked at the cabin, and from one of the windows saw the light streaming across the snow. It was a large window, and as he measured the distance, King broke into a run, steeling his lean, muscular body for the impact that was to come.
What the... Get that dog!
I'll take that gun, Manny. All right, you.
No!
Good boy, King. All right, you men, put your hands up. All right. You're all under arrest.
And in Inspector Maynard's office a week later, King stood beside Sergeant Preston.
Sergeant, you've done a remarkable piece of work. With no help at all, you brought in the whole Reynolds gang.
With no help at all, Inspector? No, that isn't true. I had help, and believe me, I needed it.
King?
That's right, sir. King. Yes, fella. Thanks to you, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit. And all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at this same time. Bob Height speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The challenge of the Yukon. The wonder dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police
who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. When Mike Allison lost his life in a blizzard as he made his way along one of the Yukon's treacherous trails, his daughter Kate took over the management of the Malamute Cafe in Last Chance. And she managed it well, because Kate was the sort of woman who did everything well. It was early afternoon. A sharp wind swept down the snow-covered street of the town as Dennis Phillips stood talking to Kate in front of her cabin.
Well, Denny, I guess you'll be setting off on another of those wild goose chases of yours soon.
Oh, so that's what you call prospecting.
Why don't you settle down here in Last Chance? There's a pile of money right in this town for anybody that knows how to get it.
Oh, I've never wanted to settle down in one place.
Denny, I've never said this to anybody, but I'll make you a partner in the Malamute Cafe if you'll stay here. You'll make more money in the cafe than you could dig out of the ground in a year. You and me could... What are you looking at?
That man Sergeant Preston's talking to.
Must be a newcomer.
Yeah. That girl standing with him must be the old man's daughter.
You're, not listening to what I was saying, Denny.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess I didn't hear you. I'm sorry, Kate. What were you saying?
Several months passed, and in the Malamute Cafe, Kate Allison sat at a table at the far end of the crowded room, her hands restlessly toying with the glass in front of her, while she listened to a well-dressed man.
You know, Kate, I'd feel mighty sorry for anybody who'd play you for a sack.
You can bet your bottom dollar nobody'll ever play me for a sack.
Not even Dennis Phillips?
Not even Dennis Phillips. I don't know why I ain't had you run out of town, you cheap gambler.
I'll tell you why, baby. Because you and me are too much alike. We understand each other. I am a gambler. And I'll make you a bet that I can tell what's on your mind right now.
Why,
You're planning a way to bring Dennis Phillips calling back to you on his knees. But you're wasting your time. Those two are in love.
Love?
Oh, miss me, Kate. You better practice up. Your aim's pretty bad.
Get out of here. Get out, you hear? I'll show you what I can do. You'll regret the day he ever laid eyes on that girl. Get out!
A week later in the cafe, Kate Allison smiled to herself as she listened to Dennis Phillips, for it seemed as if he had come crawling back.
Well, I'm glad for you, Denny. I'll stake you to whatever you need.
Well, that's mighty generous of you. And you won't be sorry. You're interested in making money, and I can promise you you'll get back 10 times
now,
more.
Wait a minute. I'm interested in making money, yes. But I'm interested in you for personal reasons, Denny.
Well, it'll mean a lot to me, this strike. Once the claim really starts turning up pay dirt, Sally and me will get married. That's why I'm so anxious.
You'll get married?
I thought you knew, Kate.
No. I didn't know that. But I do know this, Mr. Phillips. You're not getting married on my money.
What?
Go on. See if you can find anybody else in town with gold to throw away.
You should have given the kid a chance, Kate.
What are you doing here?
Oh, I was buying a drink at the bar. You don't turn down cash customers, do you? At least you didn't when I was working here. I heard your conversation.
I'm not interested in your remarks.
You will be when you hear what I have to say. What's it worth to you if I break up that little love affair you don't approve of?
What do you mean?
Just what I said. Oh, I'm not saying how I'll do it. But it ought to be worth a partnership in the Malamute.
You're crazy. I don't have to do business with people like you yet.
All right. Just forget I mentioned it.
Wait. What have you got in mind?
The next day, Clark Peters talked to Sally Morris.
It's
certainly is too bad Denny can't get anybody to stake him, Miss Morris.
He talked yesterday as if he knew someone who would.
Kate Allison was going to stake him. That is, she was until she heard that if he struck it rich, you two would get married. She'd give him the money in a minute if it weren't for that.
She's in love with Denny?
Oh, I guess she thinks she is. But then, he must mean more to you than the claim. And you'd probably marry him even if it doesn't work out. Too bad, though, that he has to be disappointed.
You mean it's because of me he can't get the money he needs to work the claim?
That's about the size of it, Miss Morris. It's you or his future, most likely. From what I've heard of this secret strike of his, it's really a good one.
I see. Thank you for telling me.
Not at all, ma'am. I'm interested in Dennis's claim myself. Mighty interested.
It was several weeks later. Sergeant Preston found Dennis Phillips sitting at a table in the Malamute Cafe, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of him. The great dog King followed close at Preston's heels. And as the Mountie sat down, King settled himself at his master's feet.
I never expected to find you here, Dennis. What about Sally? She'd hardly approve of your drinking.
Sally don't care what I do. She's gone. Father said she went off to visit some friends. He made him promise he wouldn't even tell me where. It's no use. Without Sally, I don't care about the claim. I don't care about nothing.
Is Dennis talking about his claim again, Sergeant?
Hello, Clark.
Oh, he'll talk about it all right. Tell you everything except where it is. I think it's just a pipe dream myself.
Pipe dream? Why, you...
Dennis, come on outside. I want to talk to you.
Once outside in the cold Yukon air, the two men walked together for nearly 30 minutes. The Mountie listened, and then Dennis listened, his mind clearing as he heard the Mountie's words.
You've told me where your claim is, and I believe you that it's a rich one. I want you to go out there, start to work at once. Leave the rest to me.
While Sergeant Preston talked to Sam Morris, Sally's father, Dennis prepared to mush along the trail toward his secret claim. He'd told Kate of his plans and of his talk with the policeman. And when he went to his cabin to pack his sled, he turned furiously to Clark Peters.
You were going to break up his affair with Sally Morris. A fine job you've done.
If I know Preston, once he's heard the kid's story, he'll bring Sally back to Last Chance.
And she'll be here in time for the happy ending. Oh, what a fool I was to listen to you.
You played your game and lost. But I haven't. I'm going after Phillips.
You're what?
I'm going after him. I've always been curious to know whether or not that claim of his is worth anything. If it is, you can bet I'm going to be in on the payoff.
It was a few days later. Clark Peters had bided his time after he followed Dennis to his claim. He had watched from a safe distance while the young man set up a temporary camp and began work. Then, boldly, he confronted him.
I'll hand it to you, Dennis. You were on the level when you said this was a rich strike.
Put that gun down.
Don't worry, I'll put it down when I'm ready. I'm not going to shoot you, my friend. That'd be too obvious. A blow on the head. I'll tie your hands and feet. And throw you on a sled and then...
You won't get away with it.
You see this bottle? That's wolf bait. I'll pour some of it on your clothing. And as far as anybody will know, you'll have met with an unfortunate accident.
Why, you conniving tinhorn, I'll show you can't get away
no,
with
you
it.
don't.
Oh.
That's only the beginning, Dennis. Now to get some rope.
As Clark Peters halted his sled a short time later, he had no idea Sergeant Preston's team was approaching, or that the dog King, running far ahead of his master's pack, even at that moment paused in his tracks as he caught two scents, one familiar and the other unknown to him. The air was sharp and exhilarating, and King raced forward. A few minutes passed, and he saw the two men. The one the great dog didn't recognize was dragging Sergeant Preston's friend. For a moment, King didn't understand the situation. And then he saw why his master's friend couldn't walk. His feet were tied.
Far enough. Go on, groan, Philip. You'll be screaming once you hear the wolves. Out there. Where'd that door come from? Why,
But Clark Peters had no more time to wonder from where King had appeared. He backed away from the dog who came toward him. Instantly, King seemed to be on all sides of him, cutting off his skin. As the dog leaped at him, catching the man smacking on his teeth, Clark's one thought was to get to his sled. Already, the wolves had caught the scent of the man.
The wolves? Get out of here. Wait for me, you mutt. If I had left my gun in Philip's tent, I gotta get to my sled.
King turned toward the man who lay helpless in the snow. And as he did, Clark Peters, in his hurry to reach the sled that was waiting for him, slipped and fell. And falling, the bottle he carried in the pocket of his Mackinaw broke. But Peters, thinking to evade the dog that had descended on him like a whirlwind, got up and rushed on. King set to work chewing the ropes that bound Dennis Phillips' hands.
Oh, you husky. Oh! Dennis.
Oh, Denny. Darling, what happened?
It's Clark.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. But I sure would have been wolf meat if it hadn't been for
Wolves?
you.
I did hear them a moment ago, but they seem to have gone on.
Sergeant, how come Sally's here? I mean, if
Oh,
she...
Denny, I told the sergeant about Clark coming to tell me about your claim. I was only trying to fix things for you so you'd be able to get grub staked.
I got grub staked, all right. When you left town, Kate said that... Wait a minute. Clark went to see you. Sergeant, wait till I tell you.
Yes, you'd better tell me and fast. How'd you happen to be tied hand and foot here? All we saw was King chewing those ropes through.
Dennis Phillips told his story quickly of how Clark Peters had held a gun on him and threatened to make wolf meat of him. He told of King's efforts to drive off the gambler, and as Preston heard the details, he nodded grimly.
Good work, King, old boy. But right now, there's another job for you. We'll follow Peter's tracks. Get the dogs up
The wolves had followed Clark Peters' sled, coming closer inch by inch to the man who was unarmed. Their teeth bared, giving voice to the terrifying cry that meant but one thing, death. When he heard the shots that scattered the frenzied wolf pack surrounding him, he could hardly believe his ears.
Oh, King. Oh, you husky. Hold your dogs, Peters.
Thank heaven. You can't know how awful it was. I had no gun. I've never known them to attack anyone in daylight before.
Think again, Clark. They would have got me in broad daylight if you'd had your way.
You're under arrest for attempted manslaughter, Peters. What's that on your Mackinaw?
What? Wolf bait. What? That was why they followed me. The bottle broke in my pocket.
Oh, horrible. And to think, Denny, you might have
Now,
been...
don't think about it, honey. We have a lot more pleasant things to talk about. But, Sergeant, if it hadn't been for King, I hate to think of what...
Yes, King, old boy. The case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. As Sergeant Preston walked along Stovepipe City's main street, an icy wind whipped against the Mountie and the great dog walking beside him. Passing the frame building that was the Chilkoot Saloon, the policeman saw a tall, lanky prospector approaching.
Hello there, Tom.
Hi, Sergeant. Hey, this wind's enough to lift a man clear off his feet. How are you, King, old fellow?
Well, I see you've got Marty with you.
Sure. Me and Marty are pals. Huh, boy? He's a smart dog, Sergeant. I always say he's the best in the Yukon. Then there are folks that insist he's second best. I'll agree King's a handsome-looking animal.
How's the claim coming?
Fine. Sometimes I think I'm the luckiest man alive. Right now, I've got a pocket full of dust.
And you're heading for a poker game, right?
How'd you know?
Well, let's just say I guessed. You know, one of these days, Tom, you're going to lose your shirt.
Oh, not me, Sergeant.
Well, that's what they all say. But good luck anyway.
Thanks. See you later. Drop into the saloon and watch me clean out the boys' pockets.
At first, Tom McShane showed signs of keeping his threat to clean out the boys' pockets. But then, slowly and steadily, that illogical thing called luck turned against him. He lost what he'd won. He lost the dust he carried into the Chilcoot.
Well, McShane, you ready to quit?
No. No, I'm not quitting. My luck will change, Studs.
Yeah? What are you putting in this time?
I'll bet the Lady Luck claim against that 5,000 you got in front of you.
Looks like you lose.
Wait a minute. I'm not through yet.
No? Only thing you got left, McShane, is the clothes on your back and the dog sitting beside your chair.
That's right, Tom. You still got Marty.
Oh, no, not Marty.
Well, you never know. Your luck can change, kid.
What do you expect me to do? Play the Lady Luck against his dog?
Ain't no reason why you shouldn't. You got more now than you walked in here with. A darn good-looking dog for my money.
What about it, McShane?
All right, Studs. I'll play this hand for Marty.
Yep, here's my share. It's your deal, Studs.
It was an old story in the Yukon, where stakes were high and a fabulously wealthy prospector could lose over a deck of cards the gold he'd patiently worked from the rich soil over a period of weeks, sometimes months. Tom McShane realized he'd not only lost the Lady Luck claim, but his dog Marty as well. And the realization was followed by a desolate ache that burned his eyes like unshed tears. When he stood and walked quickly toward the door, Marty followed him.
Hey, there goes your dog, Studs.
Oh, no, he ain't. Come back here, you mutt.
Don't ever call that dog a mutt, Studs, you hear?
He's mine now, and I'll call him when I like. Oh.
Listen, Marty, I don't know why I did it, boy, but you and me can't be together anymore. Understand? Maybe I'll be able to scrape up enough money, then I'll buy you back again.
I better grab hold of his collar. When he makes up his mind, there ain't much can hold him back.
Come on, Studs. Lady Luck's changed hands once tonight. I'm going to see if I can't make it twice.
I'm holding him, McShane.
So long, Marty.
The next morning, when Sergeant Preston went to see Tom McShane, he found him in a friend's cabin where he'd been staying while he remained in Stovepipe City.
Well, I heard all about it, Tom.
Yeah.
Marty came back last night?
Uh-huh. Stubbs just came and got him.
The funny thing, a man can switch his loyalties or forget, but a dog never does.
How do you think I feel? Losing the Lady Luck was bad enough, but Marty...
Well, Stubbs didn't hold the Lady Luck very long. Red told me that shortly after you got out of the game, he won the claim from Malone. A good bit of the dust he'd accumulated.
Oh, I'll never touch another card as long as I live. I've learned my lesson, Sergeant. Malone was in a pretty mean humor. He always is when he starts losing. He took it out on Marty when he found him here this morning.
Yes, I think you have learned your lesson, Tom. You know, gambling had begun to be an obsession with you. I watched it grow, and I knew it would take something important to make you stop. You've learned your lesson. And you'll miss Marty. But that's only half of it. Marty's going to bear the other half. And I'm afraid it won't be easy.
And Sergeant Preston was right. As long as Tom McShane stayed in Stovepipe City, Marty returned to his master. No matter what punishment he received from Studs Malone, the dog's faithfulness never flinched. Finally, when he saw the hopelessness of the situation, Tom left the small settlement. And a short time later, Malone also left, taking with him the dog he'd won in the poker game. Malone had had much bad luck since that night at Chilkoot Saloon. But though he lost everything else, he had a good dog, and he knew he'd need him. And as the months passed, Studs Malone taught the dog Marty the things that were to make him hated by men who traveled lonely Yukon trails. The dog performed his tasks half-heartedly, knowing that this man would deal with him mercilessly if he refused. At a camp along an isolated trail shortly before darkness, two trappers sat beside the fire.
Hey, come on. What was that?
Huh?
I heard something. Listen. I'll see what it is.
Well, I'll be... Sam, somebody's been into the ration.
You're right, by golly. Took all the meat we had. But how did... Look, beyond the trail over there. The dog.
Boy, that dirty four-legged thief.
Ah, you missed him.
Must have been that outlaw dog we heard about in Three Forks. I'd like to catch up with that mutt just once. I'd fill him so full of buckshot he'd only be good for paperweight.
At Three Forks, the head of the Law and Order Commission talked to Sergeant Preston. With the Mountie was Tom McShane, who stood silently listening to the conversation.
We have definite information, Sergeant, that the dog is in this vicinity. The description I've given you is one we've gotten from several men who had the misfortune to meet him.
I know the dog. We'll set out immediately.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll get a few of my men together and we'll go with you. Stealing food in the Yukon is a serious offense. And in this case, it's led to the death of two prospectors.
Sergeant Preston and Tom McShane, with a small group of men, set out to locate the outlawed dog and his master. King ran far ahead of the Mounties team, pausing at intervals to let the sleds catch up with him. At one point along the trail, the policeman called a halt while he examined what had apparently been a campsite. The men of the Law and Order Commission gathered to look at tracks. It was then that King noticed Tom McShane's sled pulling away from the rest of them.
I see him, fella. Let him go. I've a hunch he's trying to do some private detective work. But I think he's chosen the right direction. We'll start after him in a few minutes.
Tom McShane approached the camp near the edge of Blackstone Creek quietly. He noticed the ledge jutting out over the creek just a few yards away from a stretch of rapids. It was there Studs Malone stood when the young man confronted him.
Well, Studs, seems we meet again.
Who's that? Well, it ain't my friend, the prize poker player.
Don't reach for your gun. I've got you covered.
So I noticed. What do you got in your mind, McShane?
Where's Marty?
Oh, that's it, huh? Well, he's out on a little job. Probably getting some fresh air.
Why, you made him the hunted creature that he is. That dog didn't have a bad streak in him.
No, and he learned pretty fast. You ain't going to fire that gun, McShane, and you know it.
No. I'm not going to kill you, Studs. I oughta, but I won't. I'll just stay here and keep you...
Yeah, get away from me. Get away. You what? I'll take that gun. No, you don't. You.
As the two men fought, Studs Malone edged his opponent nearer and nearer to the creek. Beneath them, under the ledge, the waters rushed dizzily toward the rapids. Malone had the advantage of greater strength, but Tom McShane refused to admit defeat. Every blow must count. It was then he heard a dog racing toward them through the timber.
Marty, that's all I need. You did me a good turn that time, Mutt, when he turned to look for you. Kind of hard to swim weighted down with a Mackinaw, ain't it? You'll be pulled over the rapids, McShane, before you...
Before the man could finish the sentence, he saw Marty leap over the ledge. At once in the icy water, the dog swam toward Tom McShane.
All right, Studs, out of your hands.
Preston!
Yes. You know this man from the description, Hibbs? Yes, of course. Where's the dog?
Hey, look there. Out in the creek over top the rapids. There's a man in there. He'll be
probably
drowned.
a log, Jim. Lots of them come down the creek and get smashed going over the rapids. Put the handcuffs on this man. They will take...
It is a man.
It's your friend McShane, Mountie. He fell over the ledge.
But there's a dog. That's Marty. Marty's pulling him away from the rapids. Hey, there's your outlaw dog. That's the one I saw myself.
The great dog King stood on the ledge, his eyes glued to the two figures caught in the treacherous current. The spray from the rapids rose slightly beyond them. It was a mad swirl of water, and the men watching held their breath. And then it happened. King thought first. The log caught in the current, zigzagging crazily in the chopping water. As Marty swam, he struggled desperately. The log seemed about to skirt the man and his rescuer, when it veered sharply, striking the dog's head and knocking him senseless. Almost instantly, King hit the icy water. He was caught in the current, but he fought it, struggling to reach the man who was frantically trying to keep afloat. And as Tom reached out to grab King, the great dog felt the impact as Marty was helplessly thrown against his master. Scarcely knowing what he did, the man put one arm around his dog's neck, and with the other he held fast to King. And King knew he must drain every ounce of strength to pull his double burden to safety. Halfway toward the rocks where Preston stood, Marty began to swim. King had battled the current to pull them away from the rapids. And now they pulled slowly but steadily toward the ledge.
Hey, you, Jim. Get a start keep the rope to the flat. That's it, fella. Keep pulling, boy.
It was a short time later. And on the ledge, close to Preston's feet, King lay exhausted. He felt his strength coming back to him, and he looked up to find Marty, a heap of wet, straggly fur, laying close to his master, a dog's nose beside the face of the man he loved.
Oh, I still think he ought to be shot. He's alive, thanks to your dog, Sergeant. Stealing food in the Yukon, same as murder.
No, don't let him. Jim, I want to ask you a question. What would be your verdict toward a man who was basically good, but fell into bad company and became an outlaw? And then what would you say if you saw that man make an attempt to save a life at the cost of his own?
I'd say he ought to be given more than a fair chance.
Exactly. You saw this dog make a brave attempt to save Tom's life. There's the criminal. Stud, you're under arrest. And as for Marty, he's going to be paroled to Tom.
Sergeant, The Mountie saw the gratitude in Tom McShane's eyes. And he saw, too, the unquestioning devotion shining in the eyes of the dog when he looked at his master. Preston turned and looked at King. And as he felt the great dog's warm tongue touch his hand, he appreciated the bond that existed between this man and Marty.
That's all right, Tom. I understand. Yes, fella, you've done a great job. The case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network.
The challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. In the small frame building that served as a jail in Fort Munn, Jim Mackenzie had a visitor. When the guard opened the cell door, he thought there was a strange resemblance in the two men. The criminal sitting on the edge of the cot, and the tall, heavy-set prospector who'd asked to see him. It was less than a physical likeness, more a similarity in manner. If the guard wondered about it, he dismissed the thought, though he had reason to remember it later. As soon as he was out of earshot, the two men began talking.
How'd it happen, Jim? Now tell me about it.
It was that Mountie, Preston. If it hadn't been for him and that dog of his, I'd be as free as you are, Pete.
So you walked into a Mountie, huh?
Walked into him. I'd have got away from him if it hadn't been for that mutt. I swung my rifle on him.
We were standing about so far from the edge of a ravine, see?
Yeah?
1 minute, that dog ain't anywhere in sight, and the next minute, when I just had my finger ready to squeeze the trigger, he comes tearing toward us on the other side of that ravine. Well, I didn't think nothing of it because that hole was a good 15 feet wide. I figured I'd drop the Mountie and then get the dog.
What happened?
Well, it happened so fast. When I remember it, it seems like lightning. All I know is that before I could pull the trigger, that dog's flying across the ravine, and he lands square on top of me. That's the story.
So you let a dog get the best of you.
He ain't like no other dog, Pete. I never saw a dog that could clear a jump like that with space to spare. There's not another dog in the Yukon could do that. Honest. Now, listen, you ain't gonna let me rot in this hole, are you?
You know better than that, Jim. You might be dumb, but you're my brother. Now listen. Tonight I'll be outside shortly after dark. You'll be ready.
2 weeks later, Sergeant Preston sat in Inspector Maynard's office, with King, the great dog, settled on the floor close to his master's feet. Corporal Standish, one of the younger members of the force, sat at the far side of the room, anxiously watching the inspector's face.
Sergeant, do you remember Jim McKenzie?
King and I both remember McKenzie, sir.
Well, what both of you don't know is that he was visited by his brother while he was jailed in Fort Munn. And they must have planned a break. And Jim McKenzie was shot trying to escape. His brother got away.
I see.
But we've got a definite lead on Pete McKenzie's hideout near Tawaga Lake.
Near Tawaga Lake?
Right. Now, since I'm especially anxious for Pete to be trapped with the furs, I believe he's hidden somewhere near the lake. I want you two to take him unawares.
Well, it sounds like a good idea to me. We can be ready to start immediately.
Good. But one thing. Let me caution you about revealing your identities. If he should suspect who you are...
I understand, sir.
Exactly. It would cost both of you your lives. Well, good luck, gentlemen, and happy hunting.
It was a week later. With King leading the dogs, the two Mounties arrived at Tawaga Lake sooner than they had expected. And though Preston had thought much of the characteristics of the two Mackenzie brothers, he had not yet formed any plans. Dressed as trappers, the two men sighted a village of Yukon Indians in the distance as they traveled the snow-covered trail.
What do you plan to do, Sergeant? Well, I don't know yet. That'll depend largely on circumstances. Oh, and Stan.
Yeah?
Remember, from now on, call me Bill.
Oh, I forgot. I'm so used to saying Sergeant. I'll watch it, though. But what about these Indians? Do you know any in this village?
No, this is off my patrol. They're the Tawaga tribe. Oh, King. Oh, you Huskies.
The two men found the Indians kind. They were urged to stay at the village, where they might replenish their supplies if necessary. As Chief Charlie, his young son, Preston, and Stan discussed the game to be found on the shores of the lake, Preston looked up to see the man he recognized as Pete McKenzie enter the tent.
Howdy, Chief.
Oh. Well, Chief Charlie, you seem to have a lot of company.
Him trade skin. Indian make heap good deal.
I told the chief he drives a hard bargain. What are you doing up this way, stranger?
Oh, hunting?
Yeah. Game's plentiful, all right. Where are you from?
Almost any place. Where are you from?
Good enough. Just forget I asked you.
Early the next morning, Preston set out with the young Indian and Corporal Standish. Fleetfoot had dropped a young lynx, and as the youth stooped low to truss its legs...
What is it, boy? Fleetfoot, look out!
You got it just in time, Bill.
That mother of lynx. You saved my life.
I wouldn't have been ready if King hadn't warned me, Fleetfoot. I think we better get back to the village now, Stan.
I'll carry the carcass back. Then bullet hit her right between the eyes.
Later that day, Pete McKenzie sat down in the tent with the policeman.
Yeah, you sure can handle a gun, stranger. I took a look at that lynx myself. It was a clean shot.
Thanks.
I'd say a man who could shoot like that had a lot of practice.
Maybe so.
You don't have to be so cagey with me. Of course, I admire anybody can keep his mouth shut. And I spotted you two right away.
What do you mean, you spotted us?
That's what I said. What's the law got on you? Well, so maybe it ain't any of my business. But I could use you two.
How much is in it?
Oh, well, we're getting someplace. A couple of weeks ago, I lost my partner, see? Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll split his half with you two. And you can take it from me, this ain't no petty cash deal. Well, much tomorrow. I want to get out of this place before some of them Mounties come nosing around. Much as I hate the sight of them, there's no use asking for trouble.
Shortly after daybreak, the two Mounties left the Indian village with Pete McKenzie. A few hours later, McKenzie called a halt while he examined a map he carried. To get his bearings, he climbed a slope that ascended in the side of a rise that afforded a jump for skiers. Preston walked with him, the ever-faithful King at his heels.
Let's see. Yeah, this is it, all right. I was afraid we might have taken the wrong turn back along the trail.
Sure is a good view from here.
Well, might as well get going. Look at them mutts fight, will you?
Line them up, will you, boy?
As King heard Preston's order, he obeyed immediately. Crouching low, he jumped. And as the outlaw watched him, the precision and control of the dog in a perfectly timed leap brought something to life in his mind. He turned on his two companions.
Hey, that dog. That was a good 20-foot jump. He made it without batting an eye. Like he was used to jumping.
What's the idea of the gun?
I should have recognized that pooch. I heard all about him from a man that had good reason to remember him. Now get moving, both of you.
King didn't see Mackenzie pull the gun, but as he stood lining the dogs up, his sharp ears caught the threat in the man's voice. Moving with amazing swiftness, he raced to Preston's side, but the outlaw was prepared. His first shot caught Standish in the shoulder. The young Mountie fell against Preston with such force that the two men rolled back down the slope, King sliding with them.
I've got you covered and I'm coming down.
Stand. I'm all right. Just my shoulder. King, listen to me, boy. Go back to the Indian village. Understand? Get Fleetfoot. Bring him here. Go on, fella.
I missed him. That mutt moves like breeze lightning.
And I've got you, Preston.
Preston knew that alone King would cover ground in half the time it had taken them to travel by sled. But he wondered if the great dog would bring help in time to prevent Mackenzie's escape. 30 minutes later, they arrived at a cave on the edge of the lake where the stolen furs were hidden. The man who faced Preston with a fierce hatred in his eyes forced the Mountie to tie the corporal's hands and feet.
Now, I'll tie you up, Sergeant. And while you're, resting here, I'll load the canoe with the skin.
I suppose you think you'll make a getaway, huh, Mackenzie?
I know I will. You two won't last long in the cold and will be a slower death than if I was to shoot you. I've dreamed of having a chance like this, but I never thought it would happen.
As King raced over the trail, running far ahead of the young Indian's sled, he strained every muscle in long, powerful strides. He had but one thought. His head throbbed with it. He must reach his master. When the great dog reached the spot where Preston was tied hand and foot, the Indian's sled and noisy team could be heard in the distance. The Mountie's captor had finished loading the canoe, and at the dog's approach threw a look over his shoulder as he shoved off. King set to work immediately, scissoring the ropes about Preston's wrists.
Good boy, King. Good boy, fella.
Fleetfoot, I hear his dogs. He only gets here in time to stop Mackenzie.
King turned and saw the outlaw paddling furiously. Preston's hands were free now, and the dog's hatred for the man who'd held a gun on his master flared. This time he'd stop him. King was in the water, and he swam straight toward the boat, oblivious of the current pulling at his body. Mackenzie saw him coming with a sure and relentless speed that was like certain death. The man reached to the forward part of the boat for his rifle.
Get that dog right between the eyes. Gotta get that rifle. Blasted canoe, don't.
But as Mackenzie leaned forward, his arm outstretched to grab the rifle, the canoe spun dizzily in the current. Steadying himself with an effort, he realized it was a choice of getting his rifle or keeping the canoe afloat. Regaining his balance, he took up the paddles. But King was getting closer and closer.
Stay away from me, mother. I'll brain you with this paddle. Stay away, you hear?
From the shore, Sergeant Preston, the Indian Fleetfoot, and Corporal Standish watched the great dog. The young Mountie couldn't believe what he saw when the dog deliberately upset the canoe, throwing Mackenzie thrashing into the water. A short time later, Pete Mackenzie was a sullen prisoner. The Indian had rescued most of the stolen furs from the lake, and while Sergeant Preston looked at the corporal's wound, Fleetfoot and King guarded the outlaw.
How's it feel, Stan?
Almost as good as new.
You know, it's strange, Mackenzie. Jim warned you about King. It was because of King you recognized us as Mounties. And yet this dog was as responsible for your arrest as he was for your brother's.
Sergeant, tell me, why did you send King away? After what I've just seen, I think he could have handled Pete.
Pete hated King. He would have killed him, I'm sure. I didn't want to risk King's life.
No savvy. You not trapper?
Well, in a way we are, Fleetfoot. This is Corporal Standish. I'm Sergeant Preston. And this is King of the Northwest Mounted Police. Yes, fella. Thanks to you, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network.